Parker Lanes didn't mean to knock over the stack of romance novels in the corner of the bookstore. It just happened when his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, tugged too hard on his arm in excitement. "Daddy, look, they have the new unicorn book." He sighed, crouching to pick up the fallen books, cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Chloe, baby, remember what I said about library voices?" "Oops," she whispered, then giggled behind her hand. As he reached for the last book, his fingers brushed against someone else's. He looked up and locked eyes with a woman who looked like she didn't belong in this dusty little used bookstore at all. She was striking: dark wavy hair that fell past her shoulders, crisp beige coat, leather boots that looked expensive but not flashy. She didn't look annoyed. Actually, she was smiling. "Let me help," she said, kneeling beside him. "Oh no, I've got it. Sorry about that," Parker said quickly, stacking the books back into a pile. "My daughter gets a little excited around unicorns." The woman laughed softly. "Can't blame her. Used to hoard unicorn stickers when I was her age." Chloe peeked around Parker's side, eyes wide. "Do you like glitter too?" The woman leaned in like she was sharing a secret. "Only the biodegradable kind." Parker chuckled, shaking his head. "She's a glitter expert now. Last week, I had it in my coffee." "I called it sparkle juice," Chloe beamed. The woman laughed again, and Parker noticed the way her eyes crinkled at the corners: warm, easy, real. "I'm Daphne Keller," she said, offering her hand. "Parker, and this is Chloe." Daphne looked at Chloe. "Nice to meet you, Chloe. You have excellent taste in books." "She's got a whole shelf just for unicorns," Parker said, standing and brushing off his jeans. They were worn at the knees. He hadn't bought new ones in over a year. "We come here every Saturday after breakfast. It's kind of our thing." "I like that," Daphne said. "Weekends with books." Parker nodded, then hesitated. "You, shop here often?" "First time," she said. "I just moved back to town. Grew up here, actually." "Really? Welcome back." "Thanks," Daphne looked around. "This place is cozy. I miss that. New York bookstores are all sleek and loud." "New York," Parker repeated, surprised. "Yeah, lived there the last 15 years, but it was time to come home." He didn't ask why. It wasn't his business. So he just nodded again. "Well, if you ever need a recommendation for a good kids book, Chloe's basically the in-house expert." Chloe puffed up with pride. "Even read chapter books now." Daphne grinned. "I believe it." They wandered to the children's section together, and to Parker's surprise, Daphne didn't rush off. In fact, she knelt next to Chloe and helped her pick 2 books, asking questions like she genuinely cared. He watched them, arms crossed. It had been a long time since someone new had talked to Chloe like that, or him. After 20 minutes, Chloe was flipping through a book on the floor, and Parker found himself standing beside Daphne again. "So, what brings you to this part of town?" he asked, then added quickly, "Sorry, that sounded nosy." "No, not at all. I'm just looking around, getting reoriented. I used to come here as a teenager when I wanted to disappear for a while." He nodded. "I get that." She tilted her head. "You from around here?" "Born and raised, never really left. Chloe's mom, she left a couple years ago, so I stayed for her." He looked toward Chloe, who was still absorbed in glittery pages. Daphne's face softened. "You're raising her on your own." "Yeah, I work odd jobs. Right now, I'm doing maintenance work over at the college. Just enough to get by, keep her in school, keep the lights on." There was no pity in Daphne's eyes, just interest, respect even. "That's a lot." He shrugged. "She makes it worth it." "I can see that." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't feel awkward at all. Daphne glanced at her watch. "I should get going, but this was nice." Yeah, it was, Parker said, surprised at how much he meant it. She scribbled something on a receipt she pulled from her bag and handed it to him. If you're ever back here next Saturday, maybe I will be too. He looked down, a simple name, Daphne K. No phone number, no pressure, just a maybe. He smiled, we'll be here. She gave Chloe a little wave. Bye, Glitter Queen. Chloe giggled, bye, Miss Daphne. When they left the bookstore, Chloe looked up at him and said, she was pretty. Parker chuckled, yay, she was. He didn't know that Daphne Keller wasn't just someone who used to live in town. She was the new CEO of Keller and Rowe Publishing, one of the biggest book publishers in the country. She'd just taken over from her retiring father and moved their base of operations quietly to their hometown. And she hadn't meant to talk to anyone today. Especially not someone like Parker, who wore scuffed boots, carried a backpack instead of a briefcase, and had a daughter who loved glitter. But something about him had drawn her in. The way he listened to Chloe with full attention. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he didn't treat her like some fragile little girl, but like a whole person. Daphne sat in her car, outside the bookstore for a long minute, before turning the key. She hadn't smiled like that in months. And she knew, without knowing why, that she'd be back next Saturday. The next Saturday, the bell above the bookstore's door jingled softly as Parker stepped inside, Chloe's hand clasped tightly in his. Her backpack bounced against her back, stuffed with crayons and a peanut butter sandwich, just in case. Parker scanned the shop, trying to look casual. He wasn't sure she'd come back. Maybe she'd just been polite. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe she'd remembered and decided it wasn't worth it. But then he saw her. Daphne stood near the nonfiction wall, flipping through a photography book, one brow slightly raised in concentration. Today, she wore a simple navy sweater and dark jeans, her hair twisted into a loose knot at the back of her neck. She looked different, less polished, more present. Chloe spotted her first. There she is. Before Parker could say anything, Chloe tugged free and ran across the room. Daphne looked up just in time to catch the hug that barreled into her legs. Well, hello, Glitter Queen, she said, laughing as she knelt down. You came back. We always come on Saturdays, Chloe said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Parker approached, shaking his head. Sorry, she's a hugger. Hope that's all right. It's more than all right, Daphne said, straightening. Hi, Parker. Hi. It felt ridiculous how quickly his heart started up again at just that. She closed the book she'd been browsing and tucked it under her arm. I was hoping I'd run into you too. We were hoping the same, he said, and meant it. Daphne smiled, then motioned toward the front. I was just about to grab a tea across the street. Would you want to join me? Parker hesitated, glancing down at Chloe. I have my sandwich, she said quickly, fishing it from her backpack. You can go talk. I'll sit at the little table and read. They both looked at her. Seriously, she said through a mouthful, already unwrapping it. I'm busy. Daphne raised an eyebrow. I think we just got dismissed. I think we did, Parker said, trying not to laugh. The cafe across the street was quiet, with mismatched chairs and the scent of cinnamon steeping in the air. Daphne ordered a chai, and Parker asked for plain black coffee. They sat by the window, the bookstore visible across the street. So, Daphne began, stirring her drink gently, how's your week been? He rubbed the back of his neck. Busy, honestly. A pipe burst in one of the dorm kitchens, and I spent the better part of Wednesday ankle-deep in freezing water. Ouch. Yeah, but Chloe got to stay at her friend's place that night, so she thought it was an adventure. Resourceful, Daphne said, smiling. You seem good at adapting. It's not a choice, really. You just do what you have to. She was quiet for a moment, watching the steam rise from her cup. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, doing what we have to versus what we want. Parker leaned back in his chair. That sounds like someone who didn't want to come back here. I didn't, she admitted. Not at first. I left at 20 and swore I never would again. But life has a funny way of reminding you that home doesn't let go so easily. What reminded you? My father's health and the company. It needed someone to take over. He raised an eyebrow. Big company. She hesitated. Big enough, it's in publishing. He nodded, not pressing. That why you were looking at that photo book? I've always had a thing for visual stories, the kind you don't need words to feel. There was something in her tone that made his chest tighten. She didn't sound like someone bragging. She sounded tired, like someone who hadn't had a real conversation in a long time. You don't talk about work much, do you? I try not to. Most people either want something from me or assume things. Parker tilted his head. Assume what? That I'm cold or calculating, or that I can't possibly understand real life. She let out a short, humorless laugh. I once had a date tell me I was intimidating because I ordered in French. He grinned. That's not intimidating, that's just impressive. Daphne looked at him, surprised. You don't think it's too much? I think if someone's scared off by you ordering food in another language, the problem isn't you. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know, she turned back to him. Someone bitter or closed off, but you're open, honest. Honesty's cheaper than pretending, he said, and I can't afford pretending. That made her laugh, and this time it was genuine, reaching her eyes. They sat in silence for a few moments more, watching people walk past the window. Then Daphne glanced at her watch. I should get back. I have a meeting at 4. Parker nodded. Thanks for the tea. She stood, then paused. Do you have plans next weekend? He blinked. Nothing in particular. There's a fall fair just outside town. It's small, local. I used to go as a kid, thought maybe you and Chloe might come. He hesitated. Are you sure? I mean, we're not exactly. I'm asking because I want to, she interrupted gently, not because I expect anything. Parker looked across the street, where Chloe was waving at them through the bookstore window with a glittery paper crown on her head. He looked back at Daphne and nodded once. We'll be there. She smiled and stepped outside, walking away without waiting for anything more. Parker watched her go, a strange ache blooming in his chest. He'd meant what he said. Pretending cost too much. But the truth was starting to scare him more than any lie ever had. The fall fair buzzed with the scent of hot caramel and crisp apples, hay crunching under boots as families and couples wandered between booths decorated with plaid bunting and tiny orange pumpkins. Parker held Chloe's hand, her excitement vibrating through her fingers as she skipped beside him, her crown from the bookstore now replaced by a knitted hat shaped like a fox. Daphne was already there, standing near a kettle corn stand, talking to a woman Parker didn't recognize. Her coat was open, revealing a soft burgundy sweater and jeans tucked into riding boots dusty from the gravel. Her hair was down today, and she looked different again, less polished than the bookstore, more grounded than the cafe. As soon as she spotted them, she excused herself from the conversation and crossed the path toward them. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, her breath visible in the cool air. Chloe threw her arms around Daphne's waist with the kind of enthusiasm that didn't wait for permission. I promised her, Parker said simply. I'm glad, Daphne replied. There's a petting zoo near the back. Figured Chloe might like to see the baby goats. I love baby goats, Chloe shouted, already tugging her father in that direction. Daphne laughed. Should I have warned you it's loud? I get a break from glitter, he said. I'll take it. The petting zoo was a chaos of squeals and straw. Chloe darted ahead, crouching to feed an eager goat a handful of pellets from a paper cup. Parker leaned on the fence, watching her with a quiet sort of pride. She's fearless, Daphne said beside him. I like that. She gets it from her mom, he answered without looking away. Daphne's expression shifted. You don't talk about her much. I don't talk about a lot, he admitted. Not because I don't want to. I just got used to people not asking. Well, she said, I'm asking. He turned toward her. She left when Chloe was 3, said she needed something else. I don't think she meant to hurt us, not at first, but she hasn't been around since. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. Daphne didn't interrupt. She waited. I used to think maybe I wasn't enough. That if I'd had more money, or a better job, or something to offer, she would have stayed. And now, Daphne asked. Now I think people leave because they want to, not because you're lacking. She nodded. That's a hard truth. I don't need easy anymore, Parker said. Daphne was quiet for a beat. Neither do I. They walked together as Chloe ran ahead to the pumpkin painting station. A local band played near the barn, and the sun dipped low, spilling gold across the field. Parker glanced sideways. You're not really here for nostalgia, are you? Daphne raised a brow. What makes you say that? You walk like someone who's still figuring out the ground under her feet. That obvious? Only to someone who does it too. She folded her arms, her gaze tracking Chloe as she painted a crooked smile on a tiny pumpkin. I took over the company because it was expected, but I don't know if I want it. You could step away, he said. It's not that simple. There's legacy, reputation, hundreds of people's jobs. What do you want? He asked. Daphne looked at him. I don't know yet, but I don't want to keep pretending I've already figured it out. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't feel like absence. Chloe came running back with paint on her nose and a pumpkin in her arms. Look, it's supposed to be a cat, but I think it's also a potato. It's perfect, Daphne said, crouching down. Can I carry it? Chloe handed it over proudly, then spotted a sign for pony rides and took off again. Parker rubbed his jaw. She's going to crash hard tonight. I'll take a wild guess and say she'll still be up asking for one more story. He chuckled. That's a safe bet. Daphne looked back at the painted pumpkin in her hands. She trusts you completely. I hope so. She does, Daphne said. You can see it in how she moves around you, like she has nothing to fear. They wandered past booths selling cider and handmade soaps, a few vendors calling out greetings to Parker as they passed. He offered casual waves in return. You know everyone, she said. Small town, hard to blend in. Do you ever want to leave? I used to think about it, he said, back when I thought there was something out there I needed to chase. But every time I pictured it, Chloe wasn't in the image, so I stayed. Daphne stopped walking for a moment. You gave up everything for her. I didn't give anything up, chose her. They stood at the edge of the fair now, where the lights from the Ferris wheel blinked against the darkening sky. I've spent so long choosing things for other people, Daphne said. Sometimes forget what it feels like to choose something just because I want it. Parker looked at her, then really looked at her. What do you want, Daphne? The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning neither of them had spoken aloud until now. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, the cool edge of her fingers brushing his. I want to find out, she said quietly. He didn't move away. Chloe came running back again, cheeks flushed, her hat slightly askew. Can we ride the Ferris wheel? She asked breathlessly. Please, please, please. Parker looked at Daphne. I'd love to, she said. They rode together, the three of them in a single car, the fair sprawling beneath them like a snow globe of light and motion. Chloe pressed her face to the glass, marveling at the tiny people below. Parker didn't say anything as the wheel paused at the top, the wind tugging at his collar. Daphne turned to him. You look like someone waiting for something. Maybe I am, he said softly. She reached for his hand. Then maybe I'll wait too. The wheel began to move again, slowly, steadily, the view shifting with each creak of its frame. Neither of them let go. The frost had arrived early that year, dusting the rooftops in town with the soft white of November's breath. Parker guided his old truck into a space near the back of the Keller, and Roe building an imposing structure of glass and brick that looked nothing like the modest places he was used to entering. Chloe sat beside him, bundled in her thick coat, a thermos of hot cocoa cradled in her lap. This doesn't look like a book place, she whispered, eyeing the towering facade. It is, Parker said, tightening his grip on the wheel, just a different kind. She looked up at him. Are we going to see Miss Daphne? He nodded. She invited us. It hadn't been a casual gesture. A week after the fair, she'd asked if they'd join her for a private family day her company hosted every year before the holidays. Parker had hesitated, but Daphne had simply said, I want you there, both of you. That had been enough. Inside, the lobby was warm and filled with the scent of cinnamon and printed paper. A towering tree decorated with literary ornaments stood near the elevators. Daphne waited by the reception desk, dressed more formally than he'd seen her before a tailored navy coat and heels that clicked softly against the polished floor. Still, her face lit up the moment she saw them. You made it, she said, stepping forward. Chloe rushed into her arms without hesitation. It smells like cookies here. That's because we're decorating some upstairs, Daphne said, lifting her with ease. Wanna help? Chloe nodded enthusiastically. Parker followed them into an elevator. His nerves quieted slightly by the way Daphne kept glancing back at him, like she needed to make sure he was still there. The top floor had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Twinkle lights draped the windows, and oversized beanbags were scattered across the open space where children laughed, decorated cookies, and played board games on rugs. Staff mingled nearby, holding coffee and chatting in small groups. Daphne introduced Chloe to a staff member overseeing the cookie station, then turned to Parker. Come with me, she said softly. He followed her to a quiet corner where the city skyline stretched beyond the glass. A small table was set with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of pastries. She gestured for him to sit. I wanted you to see this part of my life, she said. It's been separate for so long, but I don't want that anymore. He looked at her, brow furrowed. You sure? This is your world, Daphne. I don't exactly fit in. You do, she said, because you're not pretending, and I'm tired of being surrounded by people who are. A silence settled between them, filled only by the muffled sounds of laughter and holiday music in the background. I haven't told anyone I'm stepping down, she said after a moment. He blinked, stepping down. She nodded. I've been building someone else's legacy, but I want my own. I've been thinking about starting something smaller. Local. A community press stories from here, voices that don't usually get heard. Parker leaned back slightly. That's a big shift. I know, she met his gaze. But I don't want to be the woman who never takes the life she actually wants, and I want a life that includes you. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for his coffee, took a sip, then asked, What about New York? What about everything you built there? I don't miss any of it, she said. Not really. I missed home, and now that I've found something real here, someone real, I'm not letting it go. He studied her quietly. You sure you're not just swept up in all this? I've never been more certain. She reached across the table, her hand brushing his. I know who and when I'm with you, and I like that version of me more than the one who stood on stages in Manhattan. He turned his hand over, fingers lacing with hers. I don't have much to offer you, Daphne. I can't give you private jets or penthouses. I don't want a penthouse, she said firmly. I want Saturday mornings in bookstores and fall fairs and cocoa-stained napkins. I want Chloe asking me if I want to ride the Ferris wheel again. He looked down at their hands, voice low. I've been scared to hope for anything more, but you make it hard not to. Then don't fight it, she whispered. Just let yourself want it. A hush fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Later that afternoon, as the event wound down, Daphne gathered everyone in the main lounge. Her staff quieted as she stepped onto the low platform near the fireplace. I have an announcement, she said, her voice steady. This will be my last year as CEO of Keller & Rowe. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room, but she held up her hand. I'm not disappearing. I'm simply choosing a different path, one that aligns with the stories believed deserve to be told, and I'm grateful to each of you for helping build this chapter with me. She stepped down without fanfare, walking directly to Parker and Chloe, who stood near the back. Chloe grabbed her hand immediately. I made you a cookie, she said proudly, holding up a slightly lopsided snowflake. Daphne crouched to take it. It's perfect. As the crowd began to disperse, Daphne turned to Parker. Come with me. They stepped onto the rooftop terrace, where a thin layer of snow had begun to dust the stone. The city lights shimmered below, and despite the cold, Daphne didn't shiver. I know this wasn't how your life was supposed to look, she said. And I know mine was drawn to impress people I don't even like. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. But what if this is how it's meant to look, she continued. A little messy, a little unexpected, but real. He stepped closer. You're not afraid it's too fast? Not anymore, she said. You taught me that love doesn't have to wait for perfect timing. He took her face in his hands, snowflakes catching in her hair. Then I'm done waiting too. Their kiss was quiet, but it carried the weight of every unsaid hope, every risk taken, every truth finally spoken. It wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was steady, certain. Inside, Chloe pressed her nose to the glass, watching them through the frosted window. She's pretty, she murmured to herself, then smiled. Good job, Daddy. Months later, Daphne opened her small publishing house in the heart of town. Parker helped renovate the space, and Chloe made sure every kid's corner had a place for glitter. And every Saturday, no matter how busy their lives became, they went back to the bookstore where it all started. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The first snowstorm of December rolled in with a quiet authority, blanketing the town in thick layers of white that muffled every sound and slowed the world to a hush. Parker stood on the porch of the house he'd rented for years, arms folded, watching Chloe stomp delighted tracks through the front yard in her new snow boots, ones Daphne had surprised her with after insisting she needed. Proper winter gear for ruling any snowy kingdom. Behind him, the front door creaked open. She's been out there for almost an hour, Daphne said, pulling his scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped beside him. We might have to bribe her with soup to get her back in. Parker glanced at her. You sure you're okay staying here tonight? She looked up at him, eyebrows raised. I brought 3 overnight bags and a lasagna. I'm not going anywhere. He exhaled softly, nodding. Right. I know it's your space, she added more gently. I don't want to overstep. You're not, he said. It's just been the two of us for so long, but the truth is, I like hearing your voice in the kitchen. I like waking up and seeing your coat on the hook. It feels solid. Daphne's fingers found his, gloved and steady. Then, let's build something solid. He looked out at Chloe, who was now attempting to create a snow dragon with what looked like a terrifying amount of artistic commitment. She's going to want to keep you forever, after tonight. Daphne smiled. That's the plan. They stayed on the porch for another minute before Chloe shouted from the yard. It needs wings. Soup first, Parker called back. Wings then soup. Daphne laughed, squeezing his hand once before heading inside, her boots crunching softly behind her. That night, after Chloe fell asleep with her head on Daphne's lap during a movie, Parker leaned against the kitchen counter, watching them in the soft glow of string lights he'd hung around the living room weeks ago. Daphne gently lifted Chloe and carried her to the bedroom they'd set up together, half unicorn palace, half reading nook. When she returned, she didn't speak at first, just leaned beside him, shoulder to shoulder. I talked to the board, she said quietly. They're finalizing the transition. I'll be officially out by the end of the month. Parker turned toward her. You nervous? No, I thought I would be, she admitted, but I've never felt more like myself. He nodded. So what's next? Well, she said, stepping in front of him, I signed the lease on the storefront next to the old bakery. It's got good light. Needs work, but I thought maybe Keller House Press should have its roots right where it matters. A grin tugged at his mouth. You already picked a name. I did. And you're really doing this. I already did, and I was hoping. She hesitated. You might help me design the space. You've got an eye for what feels real, and I want that. I want your touch on this. His answer was immediate. Of course. She wrapped her arms around his waist. And maybe, if you're not too busy fixing pipes and building bookcases, you'd consider moving in with us. He stilled. I know it's fast, she said quickly, but I want a home with you, Parker, not just a relationship, not just weekends and visits. I want mornings and late bills and burnt toast. I want all of it. He took her face in his hands. Then it's yours, all of it. They kissed slowly, the kind of kiss that settled into bone and memory, the kind that made promises without needing words. 3 months later, the storefront opened. Daphne stood at the front door with Chloe beside her, a pair of scissors in hand for the ribbon cutting. Parker watched from the crowd, his toolbox still at his side, paint on his jeans from installing the last shelf that morning. Inside, Keller House Press was filled with shelves made of reclaimed wood, soft rugs, and a reading corner where Chloe had insisted on placing a beanbag shaped like a dragon. The back wall had a mural of the town's lake, painted by a local artist Daphne had commissioned quietly, wanting to surprise Parker with a piece of their shared history. After the crowd filtered in, after the speeches and the coffee and the congratulations, Parker found Daphne in the back office, the door still missing a proper handle. So, he said, stepping inside, you're officially a small-town business owner. And you're the one who made it all stand, she said, literally. He leaned against the desk. You happy? She looked around the room, then back at him. I'm home. Later that evening, after Chloe had fallen asleep upstairs in the loft apartment above the press, Parker and Daphne sat beside the fireplace. She rested her head on his chest, legs tangled with his on the old leather couch they'd found at the local thrift store and restored together. I never imagined this, she whispered. Not when I left New York, not when I walked into that bookstore. Me neither, he said, but I've learned something. What's that? Sometimes the best stories don't come from the ones you plan. They come from the ones you stumble into, the ones that take you by surprise. She tilted her head up to look at him. This is the only story I want to keep writing. He kissed her forehead, then let's write it together. Years later, the town still talked about the bookstore girl who came home and built something real. But what they didn't see What mattered most was the quiet life that followed. The mornings with Chloe dancing around the kitchen, the sound of Parker's laughter drifting from the workshop, the way Daphne still reached for his hand every time they walked through their front door. And that love the kind built not from grand declarations, but from shared mornings and honest words that love never faded. It only deepened.